Good afternoon. This is Kay Kennedy with the Kentucky Department of Education. Welcome to our EANS program update for the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools Funding Program. It's October 28th, 2021. On our agenda today is a brief update on EANS 1, including tips for faster request processing, inventory status, staffing requests. Then we will do a short update on the second round of EANS funding, which we call EANS 2. Along the way, we'll address questions as they pop up in the chat. And if you have additional questions at the end and we have time, we'll certainly try to address those. If not, please submit your questions to one of the emails listed in the PowerPoint, and we'll be happy to address those on a one-to-one basis. So first, let's take a look at where we are. The total award provided to Kentucky was just over $40 million. Through the application process, $37.4 million has been awarded to 134 participating schools, serving approximately 39,000 students, and over 5,000 of those students come from low-income families. This chart shows how the awards have been spent to date. In the area of staffing, we have allocated $1 million, just slightly over $1 million to cover contracts that are in place for the 2021-22 school year ending June 30th, 2022. With respect to procurements, we've been able to complete 24 procurements on your behalf at just over $600,000. And by far, the largest amount spent to date is for reimbursements for funds that you have spent with your own money that fall into categories that are eligible under this program to be reimbursed. We've made 152 reimbursement payments, which does show about 61% of the $4 million that we spent to date. So we're about 11% through the expenditure pool for this round of EANS 1, and we have more requests for both reimbursement and procurements in the hopper, and you expect an update on those in the near future. I'd like to discuss now the process for getting reimbursement payments and the delivery of goods and services to you in a faster processing manner. Recall that the process began with your application and the budget that you developed to manage your award. That budget is referred to somewhat as the Holy Grail. Every request you send in, staffing, reimbursement, or procurement, is first compared to that budget to ensure that we are operating within the requirements of this program. You'll notice here the color coding shows that each type of request, whether it's a procurement, goes through the validation process and then is sent to the approved mailbox for actual procurement. In the reimbursement request mailbox, we again validate those requests and then send them over to the finance area for payment. And the same is true for staffing requests. We get those requests in, we validate it against your budget, and then staffing requests are sent over to our staffing partner, OVEC, to be fulfilled. For reimbursements and procurements, the KDE budget team monitors the request mailbox. Many of you have worked with Elise Crisp in the past on setting up your original budgets and getting those approved at the start of the program. We've added 2 additional staff members, Bethany Ford and Desiree Wallace, who will now be assigned schools more or less as a customer representative, and they will serve as your KDE point of contact as we move forward in the program. After a couple of months of reviewing and processing requests, the team has come up with some guidelines and tips that will help improve processing times going forward. First, use invoices, receipts, and proofs of payment at documentation to build your reimbursement request forms. Actually base your request on the documentation that you have available. For procurements, use quotes that you get from your vendors to actually build those request forms. Once a form is built, once you've got it started, go back to your budget and make sure that the request form aligns to that budget, both in terms of the description and the dollar amount. It's preferred that you break out a general category and use subordinate rows that we can identify by a request form number. Next, if you alter amounts on your budget to align with the request forms, please submit an updated budget template along with your request. Don't change any consultant highlighting, and I'll show you that in just a minute. If you need to resubmit, we do ask that you rename the updated budget with a current date and summarize the changes that you have made in the body of your email. When you do send us an updated file or a request form, please use the school name and a city location to name the file. It helps the more specific you can be so that we don't get generic files called EANS budget template. We can't tell one from the other. But if you include your school name and a city, we'll be able to differentiate that documentation, and it helps us keep things straight. Please be mindful that there's no guaranteed turnaround time for the processing of these requests. We get a delay sometimes when the budget, we can't figure out the alignment of the budget to the request form, and there's some period of back and forth with the schools. So please be mindful of that. We will get these processed just as quickly as possible. And we do need your help to make that happen. Also remember that for categories 3, 4, 9, and 12, these are procurement through KDE only. No reimbursement in these categories is allowed, except in the case of portable air purifiers, which you can purchase and retain. All other Category 3 expenditures must be done through KDE procurement. When you are submitting budgets and request forms, keep these in the Excel format and put them as an attachment in the email that you send to the relevant email box. Documentation for reimbursements or quotes for procurements may be in PDF format. You'd have to scan those in and then attach those. Please include only one request form per email. It's okay if you have multiple requests. In fact, I processed the school I'll share with you in just a minute that had a batch of 18 different requests, so I had 18 emails to deal with, but it was very organized, and by putting one request per email, we're able just to work our way through that stack of emails and know exactly what we were dealing with. So one request per email, please. And remember that the email box that you are supposed to submit the form to is included on the form, and please utilize that. So I'd like to show you an example of a budget and how we have marked that budget once requests are processed. You'll notice that we have the spending category: supplies to clean, disinfect, sanitize. This is a reimbursement. It's for classroom cleaning supplies, and the amount from the supporting documentation was $185.40. But notice now that we have color coded this as green. It is a paid reimbursement. It was request number 10, and we're able to track it completely through the color coding and the labeling of what request was used to satisfy this particular reimbursement. So as I scroll down through this particular budget, here's request 8. This was paid in request 12. This particular line item was paid in request 11. This particular item was repaid in request 3. So each item has been identified back to a particular request, and we know exactly where we are. We know exactly how much money has been spent. So when you get down here a little bit further in this budget, now we have items that are newly requested. We don't have the procurement completed on these yet. We've not gotten a request for that. So it is not highlighted, and we know that that funding is still available for use by the school. Notes that we make in the budget will help us understand any conversations that we've had and that we may want to follow up with you on. So we are using color coding as well as notes within the budget to help us keep track of what's going on. So that's why it's important when you send us your budget, please leave it in Excel format so that we can make these additions to the document to help us track what's going on. So next we'll talk about tips for faster processing relative to actually getting the payments for reimbursements and the goods and services for procurements back to the schools. Once the budget folks finish their analysis and have concluded that the request is valid, it is put in the approval mailbox to be picked up by the finance people. They will check the supporting documentation. Are the receipts there? Is the invoice there? Do we have a canceled check? And all of this information supports the fact that, yes, we can actually make a payment. So that payment detail is put into EMARS, which will then generate a payment to your school. If the payment is for an item that is identified as a fixed asset, meaning that its value is greater than $500, or it is any technology, that may trigger a notification to the fixed asset process, which will generate inventory tags. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So once you have a payment generated from EMARS, that process, we are targeting a 30-day window there to get that payment back to you. If there needs to be additional documentation, or if we have to go back to the school for further clarification, that does require additional time. So the more complete you have your documentation when you send it in the first time, the quicker we can make that process. The same is true for procurements. If you'll notice here, the blue sort of outlines the players in the procurement process. Once the budget for a procurement has been approved, it goes into our procurement management processing and finance. They will place an order with the vendor, and the invoice to be paid comes back to KDE. The vendor will supply the goods or services directly to the school. They don't come to KDE first. The items are shipped directly to the school. If it is an item that requires inventory tagging, that will be part of the inventory process. I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But again, it's an item that's $500 or more, or any technology will generate the inventory process. At this time, Alan Coldiron will provide a brief guide on EANS reimbursements and a brief guide on EANS procurements in a separate PowerPoint that I would invite you to watch. If you've got any questions in either of those areas, you can put this presentation on pause, go watch that, or just pick it up later if you want to refresh your memory about actually how the reimbursement process works. So Alan will have a separate PowerPoint up posted on our website, and you can refer to that. So I will move along here and discuss the inventory process. Again, if you get reimbursement for or make procurement of an item whose value is $500 or more, or if there's any technology, you will trigger the inventory process, which involves 2 forms that you will receive from the Kentucky Department of Education for completion, and a set of asset tags for you to affix to the items that are now in your possession. The 2 forms that you will get are an EANS inventory acknowledgement form, which is a form that indicates you understand your responsibilities relative to maintaining that item as an inventoriable item, and that you can identify its whereabouts and its status at any particular time. This item will be sent to the school with your first set of asset tags. We only need to get it back the first time. We only need to have it on file at the department for the duration of the project. You will sign and scan that document to return to KDE, and that will be in PDF format. The other form that you will receive is the EANS Equipment Assignment Record and Receipt form. This is a spreadsheet form that lists all of the asset tags that you have been assigned with this particular reimbursement or procurement. You will affix to that spreadsheet any identifying information such as serial number or other type of tracking identification numbers. You'll complete that Excel spreadsheet and return it to KDE in the Excel format. That becomes a part of our inventory at KDE, and we will need to be able to access that in Excel format in an ongoing way. So please return that in Excel format. To date, we have sent out almost 3,000 tags for items that need to be tracked, and those tags have gone to 25 separate schools. We have received the inventory acknowledgement form back from 6 of those schools, so we've got a way to go there. And the assignment record for 3 of those procurements or 3 of those asset procurements have been returned. So if you are working on those, we appreciate that. If you can get those turned back into us just as soon as possible, we'll get those on file. It might be problematic if you have already dispersed the items before you got the tags, but hopefully in your own internal inventory system, you know the serial numbers or other identifying information. You can actually go ahead and attach that or add that information to the Excel spreadsheet and maybe be in a position to actually physically attach the tags at some point in the near future, or perhaps when you get those laptops or iPads back at the end of the school year, you can actually affix the asset tags at that particular time. But try to let us know which item is assigned to the KDE asset tag number and get that back to us just as soon as you can. If you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to give us a call. The last process that I would like to discuss is the staffing request process. Using EANS funds, schools have the ability to acquire staff to help address learning loss caused by the COVID pandemic, or to add instructional services, add instructional aides to your staffing to assist with those learning goals. As you know, the Ohio Valley Education Co-op is administering this part of the EANS program. Once we receive a request from a non-public school in our staffing mailbox, that is validated again against your budget to make sure that you have funds allocated for staffing needs. And once that's validated, we send that request form to OVEC. The folks at OVEC will then create a posting to put on their website and advertise to have the position filled. OVEC is also in contact with the school's principal, who can assist with any other additional information, any information about candidates who may want to apply for that position, so that we can get them pointed in the right direction to have their name considered for a particular position. OVEC works directly with the school once a candidate has been identified and has cleared all the background checks. A contract is signed, and we know exactly how much money is going to be spent for that particular position for the rest of the school year, and that includes tax withholdings, that includes insurance or any other fringe benefits that need to be taken into consideration. So it's a complete end-to-end process. To date, our schools, I think we have about 51 schools that have made requests for staffing, and we've heard from 29 schools that have an active request going for a total of 120 positions. So far, we have filled 44 of those positions for about a 37% percentage there. The total dollars requested for staffing is a little over 4.2 million. And so far, we have contracted for about 1.4 million of that in the current school year. So the total remaining, if there are new hires that are going to be made at mid-year for the second semester, or if there's summer programs that will be addressed with these funds, there is money remaining in your school budgets to handle that. So again, we appreciate the partnership with OVEC to get this done, and are glad to have folks out in your schools who can help you address the learning needs that have been caused by the pandemic. We do have one question concerning staffing and what happens to the staffing money allocated in the budget if no one applies or you can't fill a position. So in this case, you may want to redirect those funds to another category. You may want to spend that in technology, or you could buy additional supplies, cleaning supplies, or PPE, something like that. That's budget modification, and you will work with the group that we mentioned earlier, Elise and her team of consultants, who can help you modify your budget and get those funds reallocated. Just remember that you can't go over the amount that you were originally awarded. That spreadsheet is on the KDE website. You can't go over that total amount, but you can move some money around in the various categories if you see that your needs have changed from what you originally thought they might be. So I'd like to spend some time now to talk about the second round of EANS funding. We call that EANS 2. That was a result of the passage of the American Rescue Plan earlier this year. We were notified last week that our Kentucky application has been accepted, and that provides a little bit over $42 million to be utilized in Kentucky. So a couple of things have changed from the first round of funding that was through the CARES Act to this round of funding through the American Rescue Plan. Pretty much the same spending categories, but all expenditures need to be done through KDE procurements. So there will be no reimbursements. It will be all procurement. The low income threshold will be 20%, and based on your school's 2019-2020 data. So the basis of the data is the same, and the low income threshold is 20%. A couple of items to keep in mind. We will be sending out formal information relative to this program. I think you can see that in the next few weeks. A couple of things particular to Kentucky's implementation. For the EANS 2, program, we will be utilizing an internal, it's a program that we use internally for other federal programs. We use this program with the public schools called GMAP, Grant Management Application and Planning Platform, GMAP. We are currently working with the vendor to put in the requirements for the EANS funding program, and we'll have that up and running here in a few weeks to test, and we'll get that rolled out hopefully within the next month. Schools will have to basically complete two parts. First, we need to know your intent to participate. What that will do is allow us to get you set up in GMAP with a user ID and a password, so that then you can complete the application and have that considered for participation. So if you think you want to participate in the second round of EANS funding, once you receive that notice of intent to participate and you can get that back to us, we will know who is interested in being a part of that. The second thing is that GMAP will contain the sections of information like you saw in round one, your school demographics. There will be some questions about how you will spend the funds, and there will be a place to indicate a budget. There will also be assurances like we've had with round one. But the good thing about GMAP is that we won't be sending spreadsheets and pieces of paper back and forth. All the information will be contained and attached in the GMAP application. The advantages of this platform, it is a web-based secure platform that gives us one point of communication. It's very streamlined, and it's sort of like a one-stop shop. One system will house all of the information relative to your particular application. We can access the budgets in real time. Both KDE and the school can be looking at their budget at the same time. We won't need to be spending time sending spreadsheets back and forth and try to make sure that we have latest copy, etc. All of this will be contained within the GMAP system. And then finally, the GMAP system does have reporting features that are important to the department. As you can imagine, the federal government will be interested in, A, have we allocated all the funds, and how have those funds been spent? What categories that the money is being spent in? What part is reimbursement? What part is procurement? The government will want to know all those particular little details. So when you receive notice of the intent to participate, please get those back in just as quickly as you can. So one thing to keep in mind with respect to the second round is that there will be a bit of training for applicants. It is a very intuitive program, very straightforward, but we do want to introduce you to that platform. So there will be webinar sessions to get you used to that application. We want to make sure that you have identified who will be your point of contact to work in that system. And we are looking at about a month to get that rolling and out to you guys, so be on the lookout for that. In particular, if you have questions about the American Rescue Plan, what the legislation looks like, what the U.S. Department of Education is talking about, here is a link to the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at the U.S. Department of Ed, and you can read the specific details about this second round of funding. We will be putting additional information on the KDE EANS website, and I think it will be a challenge for both the department and schools to make sure we keep our streams of funding separate, and yet we are able to manage towards a good specific goal. So that challenge will be out there to keep both of these programs separate yet going in the right direction. So we appreciate your cooperation on that as well. That is all the information that we have to share today. If this has generated some additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me, K Kennedy at this k.kennedy2@education.ky.gov. My direct phone line at KDE is also listed there. And I would like to remind everyone that I'm at the department on a part-time basis, so please leave a message or shoot me an email and I will get back to you just as soon as I can. Appreciate your participation in today's webinar, and if you can share this with other members of your team, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much.